Hello and welcome to another broadcast of the Leavenworth Lansing Area Government Channel 2. This is one of the series of our introductory programs utilizing Channel 2 to inform people in the Leavenworth Lansing area about government programs and government activities that are important to our citizens. Today we're doing another broadcast of the program we call City Talk, and I'm John Tillotson, moderator of this program by virtue of being the chairman of an advisory committee to the city governing body of the City of Leavenworth, which established the original program. My guest today, I'm very happy to have with me Police Chief of the City of Leavenworth, Lee Doring, and the Sheriff of Leavenworth County, Herb Nye. Both of these gentlemen have a world of experience in law enforcement, and we're going to talk a little bit about that to kick things off today. But primarily we're here to talk about the new facility that we're all celebrating the opening of, and that is the new Justice Center for Leavenworth County, which will be opening on June the 3rd, the year 2000. Welcome, Lee. Nice to have you here. Herb, welcome to the program. We've already outlined a little program that we're going to try to follow with you today. It'll be highlighted in part by some photographs which are being taken by the city staff of these facilities at the Justice Center. So during the program, when we talk about certain areas, for example, we're going to talk about joint facilities at the Justice Center, we'll expect the viewing audience to be seeing photographs of the things that we're going to talk about. But before we get into talking about the Justice Center itself and the physical facilities, I'd just like to have you, Lee, talk about yourself for a moment. You came to the City of Leavenworth several years ago from the state of Colorado, is that correct?
Correct. I'm in my 30th year in law enforcement. I began 30 years ago in Arvada, Colorado, spent 20 years in service to that community, and came to Leavenworth almost exactly 10 years ago as Chief of Police.
How big is your department now?
I have 92 total employees, 64 of which are officers or sworn commissioned police officers.
And Herb, let's hear a little bit about you. Leavenworth voters, of course, familiar with you being on the ballot. What about your experience in law enforcement?
I came to the Leavenworth County Sheriff's Department in 1970 and rose through the ranks as sergeant and lieutenant. And in 1992, I ran for office of sheriff and was fortunate enough to be elected. And I have been sheriff since I took office in January 1993.
Both of you were active in the organization of a committee to study the need of Leavenworth County for a new jail facility, and that turned into a more comprehensive study for a justice center, which involves not only the jail but offices for your respective departments and the offices for the district court and all the judges of Leavenworth County. As I recall that, what's your recollection about that, Lee? How'd that get started?
The committee really came about after a failed vote in 1994 for a half-cent sales tax to fund building a jail. And at that time there were several community leaders that went to the respective city and county commissions at the time and said, we recognize there's a need for improved facilities for law enforcement in the city and the county, and in addition there's also a recognized need for improved facilities for courts and other supportive offices. And they brought forth a recommendation that the two governing bodies appoint a group to study the needs to come together from all different disciplines representing the public, the entities involved, and try to identify what the problems were, identify some recommended solutions to the problems, identify a means of funding the solutions that they recommended. And that committee was formulated with, I think there was 25 or 26 people initially, and it first met in March of 1995.
Herb, why don't you recall for us When that committee was set up, I believe that the participation of almost all the governmental entities in the county was acquired to make that a joint effort. Do you remember which communities were involved in that?
That's correct. The Leavenworth, Lansing, Basehor, Tonganoxie, all the cities, including Lansing, Linwood, and Easton, were all contacted to ask for their support in this endeavor. Since it is a sales tax, a portion of that sales tax goes back to the cities that generate it, and that would add to their revenues for street improvements or more fire protection or whatever they wanted to use it for. And I believe that was one of the key elements to help sell it.
All right, but the primary dedication of that sales tax, which by the way was a 1-cent sales tax, right?
That is correct.
Or 1% sales tax on sales in Leavenworth County, was dedicated to the construction of this new Justice Center.
The county has dedicated its entire portion to the payment of the bonds that were allowed for the center itself. If there is a shortfall in the revenue, which I believe there has been over the past couple of years, to make that debt payment, then the cities have agreed by this same agreement to furnish the necessary funds to supplement that payment to make sure it's made.
All right. Now, as I recall, the total commitment here was about 23 or 24 million dollars. You remember that?
The total commitment was $23.4 million.
That was raised by
construction of the building.
That was raised by the sale of bonds, and that's for construction.
Right.
In addition to that, I suppose all the well, especially the city and the county, have other commitments for operating funds as well as furnishings and equipment. Is that correct?
There has been some furnishings had to be added to that were deleted in the initial program. When it was initially studied, the need was at, I believe, 27 million, and that was downsized to the 24 or 23 million, which we came up with.
The ballot question we took to the voters was for approval of a $23.4 million project. And initially the architectural estimates of construction and furnishing was significantly higher, and we brought that back within the scope of what the voters approved.
So was the project actually scaled back a little bit from its original conception, Herb?
Yes, it was.
What's your recollection about how that occurred, or what occurred?
Well, there was some value engineering studies done to determine what exactly was needed, what was whistles and bells, and what was actually base necessities. And when that was completed, that's when it was whittled down to the 23.4, I believe.
And when we did the value engineering study, we tried to minimize the elimination of occupied usable space and save money through other alternatives in construction. Redesign of the excavation as one example, looking at different alternatives in roofing, or heating air conditioning systems that were less expensive but just as usable and functionable.
Now, after the original committee met and supported the bond issue election, did you gentlemen continue to serve on the design committee and the like for the entire project?
Yes, we've been involved since March 15th.
When you say that with a smile on your face, that means considerable involvement?
Extensive involvement.
We've lived, breathed, and slept with this building for the last 5 years.
And the great thing about it is you're going to get to live in it now.
That's correct.
Which I really think is unusual, but certainly I just want to state that from my own observation of the project here, that the two of you probably more than any other single individuals, I think, were responsible for the success of this, primarily because of your support of one another and your cooperative attitude. And I think that came through very clearly at the time of the election, and was a message that everybody in the county received and appreciated.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
We all owe you a vote of thanks for that. As I recall, there were some objectives. The three of us served on a committee together, I believe, to get this thing going way back when, but there were some objectives that we outlined at the time, and of course one of them was cost. Lee, do you want to address how the project addressed the issue of cost and what the advantages were?
Well, in the onset, we were looking at building separate facilities, and it was recognized right off the bat that there would be a lot of duplication of costs that would be incurred by building a separate police department, separate sheriff's department, jail, and then addressing the courts and other entities separately. And the committee recognized that right off the bat also, and strongly recommended that we do a consolidated building that housed several different entities that all had a strong relationship with one another, and that we would be able to reduce the cost of construction by not replicating, but by sharing certain aspects of the building and certain equipment, infrastructures within the building, that those costs could be reduced by the large scale of purchase, for one thing, by the coordination and reduction of duplication, and by really greater efficiencies between the different entities, because we all interact with one another in varying ways and to varying degrees, and that communication interaction, if we can improve that through systems, saves a lot of man hours and salary in efficiencies that way.
Well, initially, though, excuse me, the actual costs, the substantial costs that were achieved were in the physical facilities, and in the future it'll be in possible joint use and joint purchasing that the two of you will be able to do. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Herb, why don't you talk a little bit about the objective of building the new jail? Certainly that was one of the principal ones, a new secured facility. My recollection is that your old jail was oftentimes overpopulated. You always had a demand for more space and a demand for better space to treat women and juveniles and so forth. Just talk about the needs and then how they were met with this new facility, would you?
Well, we have been in federal court on numerous occasions through lawsuits filed by inmates for such things as outdoor recreation, inadequate facilities to handle special medical cases, and special diets for the inmates. This facility was designed to avoid those lawsuits, if you will. One of the directives, if you'll remember, John, because you did sit on that committee, was to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act and the American Correctional Association standards to as much as possible, and I believe they have met those. Going back, thinking about the studies, there were several studies that were done for a new facility, and the most prominent was done in 1983 by Dr. Robin Ford from Sea Island, Georgia. And his study found that the statistics are projected for the year 2000, or 1995 at that point, were our population should be exactly what it was, and his statistics are bearing out today. And so with that in mind, that was the project or the goal of setting the number of cells or number of beds we needed in this facility, and we just continued that out to the year, I believe it was 2020, if I remember correctly.
Why, what did you and the people involved in planning do in order to design this facility?
Oh, it's been an ongoing go-around. I wanted a secure facility as I had right now. Some people say, well, it's an old jail. It was built in 1938, at that time, to house 124 persons. In 1974, they came in with a remodeling and cut that back to 65, which is our current capacity. We are, as you said, operating at capacity almost on a daily basis now. So that was, we engineered that in keeping in mind security was number one. The locks, we wanted better locks than were projected by the architect. Wanted better walls. I wanted simple things like floor drains that we don't have in the current facility because of some flooding issues. There's so many things that we talked about and changed to make this facility a better facility. The separation of the medical units. We don't really even have a medical unit itself. It's an office that's shared right now with as an officer's break room. So there's a lot of issues that are taken care of by this new facility and its design.
I was thinking that in the study period prior to the election, a group of people went around and saw all the new facilities in our neighborhood, including CCA and Leavenworth, and remember the jail, the new jail over at Oskaloosa.
Jefferson County, Platte County, Lyon County. Yes, we made a trip to several of those to look at what was good with them and what was bad with them and what they didn't like. We talked to the staff, made sure that what was proposed for us, that they have incorporated into their facility, actually does work. And if it did work, then we asked that it be incorporated into ours.
Well, just taking a brief tour through the jail with you yesterday, the two of you, I noticed that just in terms of appearance and design, that it resembles a lot of those new facilities that we visited several years ago.
One of the things in relation to security we asked and tried to design into the building as a whole, including the jail, is security. And the building is broken down into 3 zones, a public zone, an employee zone, and then a secure zone for prisoners. And we've tried to minimize the overlapping of those zones as much as possible, which was one of the big problems we had in the existing courthouse and City Hall, where prisoners were intermingled with the general public and with employees, the employee body, and we've tried to minimize that as much as possible through design.
Well, tell us about the manner in which prisoners are actually brought into the courtroom. I think that's kind of interesting to the public.
The inmates now in the new facility are taken up by elevator to a private corridor that is only for officers and inmates. Those corridors run to the north side and the south side of the building, and there again it's totally isolated. There's no windows, no doors to it. It then feeds into either a stairwell or an elevator, and that elevator and the stairwells drop down 1/2 floor to what would be the 4th floor, or the main courtrooms of district court. It also goes down 1 more floor to where the municipal court is being held on level 3. They empty in to special holding cells that are totally isolated from the public. They can't see who's in there. They don't know who's in there until the moment they step through the doorway into court. So there's no contact with the public now, not like when we take them across the street currently and march them through the public and across a busy street and such.
Well, I'm sure most people in the community have seen prisoners being transported across the street from time to time and wondered about actually the wisdom of that was irrelevant because you had to get them there somehow.
That's exactly right.
I want to return to this issue of efficiencies because in my tour of the facilities with you gentlemen yesterday, it looked to me like there's a lot of planning and a lot of good ideas that have been embraced in the new building. Lee, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the efficiencies that you see in the operation? What kind of joint facilities are there that you can share?
There's several areas within the building itself physically that are shared between occupants. The Sheriff's Department, Police Department share a locker room and shower facility for our officers. We also share an exercise room. In the building is a large training room that has the capacity of holding 100 people, or it can be subdivided into 2 50-room classrooms. And that's for the building in its entirety. There's a shared break room for employees of the building. But I think probably the most significant and the greatest cost-saving area is in the area of communications, or dispatch center. The Sheriff's Department, Police Department will share a single dispatch center, both physically and with equipment. This project has really expanded beyond the physical limitations of the building to incorporate some of the informational and communication needs of both of our departments. We've purchased and installed and implemented a information system which takes care of both of our dispatching needs, takes care of our records needs, and also the software is capable and is being incorporated into such other entities as the municipal court, the county attorney's office, the district court, and city county probation areas. So there's scale there. And beyond that also, rather than looking at a single separate telephone system for this building, the city and the counties as a whole chose to look at it at their needs, because both had significant telephone deficiencies, and the city and county came together purchasing one telephone system that serves not only the Justice Center, but the courthouse, city hall, and the outlying entities associated with each of those governing entities.
Herb, let me ask you, one of the most impressive facilities that I noticed when I went on the tour with you yesterday was this joint locker room facility for police and sheriff's deputies. Tell the public about that.
It is a area that is shared by the Leavenworth Police Department and the Leavenworth Sheriff's Office, excluding the dispatch. They have their own locker rooms and their own break rooms. The locker rooms, a male, female. The male has, I believe, 156 lockers in it to accommodate, like I say, Lee and us. And the females, I believe, has about 70 in it. They all have their own shower facilities. Every officer's given 1.5 lockers so they can store a clean uniform in there if they want, or their shoes and such. It's a very nice facility because we have nothing now.
What do you see an advantage to having people dress out and the like together?
Well, certainly. They're going to be sharing information just in idle talk, if nothing else. And I hope that it'll bring the two entities a little bit closer in their day-to-day dealings. I mean, not that we have problems. We do have our differences. I would never tell anyone that we don't see eye to eye on everything. But we do get along, and I think this will further the camaraderie of the two agencies to bring it a little closer together and understand each other's problems. And passing along of the information, it may just be that one little word that's said that will key an officer's memory to say, well, wait a minute, you had a problem with that? I did too, and let's talk about this and share information.
There's a lot of crimes that are solved in the locker rooms.
And in the donut houses.
Yeah, by an officer saying, you know, I stopped this guy out here prowling around at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was driving this type of car, and the deputy saying, well, you know, we had a burglary about that same time period, and a general description of that type of car. That's the connectivity that solves crimes.
Mm-hmm. Why, another thing I noticed is that you have one laboratory facility. Now, I understand that this is actually operated by the City of Leavenworth. Is that correct, Lee?
Correct.
But Herb, you foresee that being a profitable endeavor, one lab facility?
Oh, I think there's no need for two, and that was one of the discussions of the shared areas. The police department put it into their area. It was better situated there. They can do the processing for us. It's not a big problem, with our officers standing by, and they've agreed to do that. In return, we'll be doing some other things for them, maybe fingerprinting with a new system that we have to connect straight to the state. Maybe some photos will be taken there outside of your everyday walk-ins that we have to do.
The photographs that our audience has seen at the outset of this program will demonstrate that when they walk into this building, there will be the police department will be on the left, or the north side of the building, and the sheriff's office on the right, or the south side of the building. However, once you get behind the closed doors, there's full communication between your departments in the building. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yes, there's full communication, both personally, by telephone, email, computer systems. The total building is networked with communication devices, so there's any number of ways to talk to one another.
Why, another thing that I noted is you've got a single indoor garage, which you're both to use. Is that right, for impounding vehicles or other evidence?
Well, the garage area is part of the intake area for prisoners. The receiving and discharging of prisoners will be done through that. In a corner of that, what they call sally port, is a caged-in area where we can bring vehicles in for processing, because it is out of the weather, it is a heated garage. It will just aid in not bothering other people. Say, as I believe PD takes theirs down to animal control now, and
right.
We have to take ours to maybe the county shop or somewhere like that. It will just help us a lot, just having a place to take it that is centrally located to our
it's an area
tools.
that's convenient, that we can protect the evidence, and we can share it and process it at our convenience, but more importantly, protecting and maintaining the chain of custody is part of the evidence.
I noticed also, now that the facility's almost finished, that there's a security booth at the front door. Tell us about that, would you?
Well, the security booth, and the reason I'm smiling is because we're still waiting for the equipment to be manned, even though the police department has moved in and other entities will be moving in over the course of time over the next few weeks. At that point, there will be a metal detector that everyone who enters the building will have to go through. There will also be a package scanner, and this is set up almost identical to what you go through at the airport. Your packages will be scanned. If there's anything suspicious in it, it will be examined at that point. There are gun lockers there for visiting officers from out of our jurisdiction, so they can leave their weapons there without going into the building itself when they have to attend court or go see the county attorney or something like that.
All right, and what do you foresee, that there'll be some security officers engaged to run that facility? Would they be deputy sheriffs, or would they be police officers? What do you foresee there?
Not necessarily. I believe the county commission will have to address that matter, whether they hire a security firm of some kind or authorize me to do some hiring of some individuals to man that booth. That's still
These
a little
people
bit.
Maybe contract employees.
All right,
Right.
so they might have security duties, but they wouldn't be law enforcement officers?
Not
yes?
necessarily.
No.
All right. So there'll just be the one entrance to the building then, on the west side?
Yes. That's
Public.
public
One
entrance.
public
Public
entrance.
entrance, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that a lot of people are looking forward to the opening of this building, just like I am. The open house, just to reiterate, is the 3rd of June, which I think is a Saturday, is it not?
It is Saturday, and I would hope that the public can come in and take a look at what their money was spent on. We think they'll be very favorably impressed that it's a great and wonderful project. We've been occupying now for about 3 weeks, and it's like night and day, and it's everything we hoped for.
You've been in for 3 weeks, Herb. When do you plan to get in there?
We won't be there for the open house. No, the area will be there, but our move is keyed to the hiring of manpower and getting them trained for the jail. And when that is accomplished, then we will move.
Is that about done?
No, we still have some more hiring to do, and we are undergoing, as we speak, the training
I think
that's being conducted.
The courts are scheduled to move, what, about the 24th of May?
I think the latter part of
Something
May.
like that.
Yes.
So by the 3rd, most of the building will be occupied, and certainly the public will have an opportunity to see their tax dollars at work.
And I want them to be able to walk through the jail, an empty jail, and see it just as it is now.
Good point. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you on the 3rd, and we'll look forward to seeing our audience on June 3rd. Thanks for being with us today on City Talk.